Hello and welcome to another live stream. So it's again Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. Today we're going to be looking at how to compare two texts for GCSE English language. So obviously last week we were doing maths, we were looking at rounding, estimating and bounds. So if you didn't catch that one, then perhaps you want to go back and have a look at last week's as well. But this week we're focusing on English and we're focusing on text comparison, specifically non-fiction text comparison. So in probably one of the more popular exam boards, this would be the paper 2 in the paper 2 for English language, specifically question 2. So welcome to everybody on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. There's also a link in the description below for our Patreon, which I imagine we have some patrons watching as well. So thank you for that. On the Patreon, we stream these full lessons live on Sunday, but on the YouTube only part of the lesson will be uploaded. So to get the full experience of each of those lessons and the full resources and tasks that will help you revise for your exams, you'll need to subscribe to the Patreon as well. Okay, brilliant. So what we're going to do on YouTube today is we're going to take a look at a comparison question. Specifically a summary comparison question. So the reason that this video is part 1 is that today we're going to look at a specific kind of comparison where we're comparing ideas between two texts in quite a surface level way. So it's going to be like a summary of both texts and how they compare. Whereas another form of comparison might be a more analytical one, which we will cover in a part 2 video at some point, probably within the next month, in the coming weeks when we do more English sessions. So there are two types of comparisons to master for GCSEs. This is probably the simpler one, so we're going to start with this. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a question, consider how we think about that question and how we consider a response. We're going to read through two texts. As we go, I'm going to discuss the things that I might pull out of the text in relation to the question, perhaps highlight and make some notes. And then what we're going to do is fill out a very small planning table for this question, which will have each element that you need to answer the question. So the only thing you really need to answer a question like this is a quote, an inference, and a comparison. So we're going to fill out that table, which is going to help us do that. And then for just the Patreon viewers, we're going to then look at writing a complete model answer for an exam response. So we'll take the planning that we did in the table and we will transfer it to a complete written response using quite a structured paragraph plan that I have prepared. Okay, so first things first, we're going to take a look at the question that we're going to be looking at today. So here is our question. It says, or task rather, it's not actually worded like a question. Use details from both texts, so there's your clue that you're going to need to quote and provide evidence from each text, to write a summary. So that's the type of writing you're doing. You're summarising the ideas and what's happening in the text. You're not analysing language or structure or anything like that. Of what you learn about the differences, that's important because quite often this question is presented as differences, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's similarities, and you need to make sure you've paid attention to that so that you're focusing on the right type of comparison. Different exam boards may specify to look at similarities and differences at the same time, so you can make a decision there. But if your question says either differences or similarities, you need to make sure that you are looking at the right one. Of music playing technology. Now, although the rest of it, which I've already mentioned, is crucial in explaining to you how you answer the question, this part here is the most important part. And I'm just going to get probably a bit of a highlighter on that one. And the reason it's the most important part is because it is the focus of the question. What you don't want to be doing is comparing anything else about the text. You don't want to be comparing what they think about the weather or what their language use is like. It has to specifically only be about music playing instruments within those texts. Okay, so what we're going to be doing as we read through the texts is thinking about what the music playing technology is like within each text, and then we're going to think about how we compare them and specifically how we can highlight the differences between them and explain those well. Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to have a look at the first source. I'm going to chat through it as I go, but I'm going to give you a little bit of time at the end of the reading for you to make some notes of your own about anything that you learn just initially from that first source about the music playing technology within the source. And if you can, perhaps maybe jot down a couple of quotes that back that up. And then obviously we'll think about comparing once we've read the second source. Just for anyone on Patreon as well, this resource is available to download underneath the video, so please do that because it might be more useful for you to have that up on your screen. Okay, so let's have a little read through this text then. So, at the beginning, I've got a little context note, which is always really important to read so that you can understand where this text is coming from. It will give you kind of a more immediate understanding of the point of view, for example. Just a thing to note as well, a question in the style like this will always have a text from the 19th century, so the 1800s, and then a text that's either from the latter end of the 20th century or the early 21st century. In this case today, it will be the 21st century. It was from 2024, so just last year. But the reason for that is because language changes all the time, and so it shows a greater understanding of English in general if you're able to understand older texts, because the syntax is kind of alien to the way we speak every day, and so therefore it shows kind of a deeper understanding of language structures if you can understand older texts. Okay, so let's have a look at this then. So in this article from a newspaper written in 1878, the writer describes the many possible uses for the phonograph, an early example of a record player and music playing device. So we know now that the phonograph is probably going to be the music playing technology that's focused on throughout this text. So what we're looking for are details and information about that piece of technology, so about the phonograph. Okay. So the effect is startling enough when, from some hillside hollow, an echo gives back, unexpectedly, an answering cry. But what if that echo were, by a touch of magic, able to leap into vocal life with precisely the same cadences and tones, got a little typo there I think, in which they were originally uttered, and this not once only, but 100 times. So it seems to me that the introduction of this particular piece is kind of showing the wonder of the writer towards the technology. I'm going to write it down purely because I know that in a language paper you're also going to get a comparison that is analytical, but it's also about writers' viewpoints. So I'm actually writing that down, imagining that I'm in an exam for later. What we don't want to be focusing on today is viewpoints necessarily, because that's not what the question is asking of us. But at some point in the same exam, you will get a question on viewpoints, which we will look at in a later video. But I'm writing that down just to emulate what I might do in an exam. I'm noticing something about it. But in terms of just the actual technology itself, we've not really learned anything about it yet. So nothing yet for the question we're answering today. Yet nothing less, nay, infinitely more than this, has been achieved. To verify the assertion, one has only to step from the pavement of Regent Street into the London Stereoscopic Company's premises. There, this recent invention, the phonograph, which first imprints the message, then speaks or sings it off any number of times that the operator's will, can be seen and heard. So we know that the technology in here can record and immediately play back. So I'm just kind of maybe making notes as I go. What I might start doing actually is just kind of talking about it, because otherwise I'm going to make a mess of this, because this pen's quite difficult to write with on here, and then you can make some notes afterwards. So the first thing we've learned is that the phonograph is a piece of technology that can record somebody speaking or singing and then play it back to them. Some of the numerous possible applications of the phonograph may readily be guessed. By its means, letters may be dispensed with friends and lovers, sundered by half the globe, may communicate with each other by word of mouth. To effect this, all that is necessary is to speak into a phonograph, then to remove the metallic record from the cylinder, pack it in a box, and send it by post to the antipodes, and, being the rotated on a similar instrument, being there rotated on a similar instrument, it will deliver its message of friendship or love in the tones of the original speaker. So it's showing that the technology here is actually being used for personal communication, or considered for personal communication. It's not simply to play music that's patented and copyrighted by famous artists. It's to send messages, audible messages, to other people through the use of the record player. Okay, Dr. William F. Channing, giving in a popular scientific periodical some anticipations concerning the photograph, writes as follows: "We shall have galleries where utterances of great speakers and singers will there be kept for 1,000 years. In these galleries, spoken languages will be preserved from century to century, with all the peculiarities of pronunciation, dialect, and brogue. We shall go to public halls to hear these treasures of speech and song brought out and reproduced as loud as, or louder than, when first spoken or sung by the truly great ones of earth." So this idea that the musical technology isn't necessarily just for music, which is interesting. It's potentially going to be used to preserve speeches and voices of great people who have done great things, and to be kept in a museum in the same way visual items are kept in a museum. Certainly, within a dozen years, some of the great singers will be induced to sing into the ear of the phonograph, and the electrotype cylinders thus obtained will be put into the hand organs of the streets, and we shall hear the actual voices of our best singers ground out at every corner. Okay, so it's not yet happened. The way that we, perhaps us, as modern readers, experience music playing technology is that we think of it initially as something where we hear famous singers, but this shows that this piece of technology is so new that that's only just being thought of, and that hasn't happened yet, so we haven't used it to record some famous singers. So at the moment it seems that this text is about talking about the possibilities of music technology and what it could achieve, rather than perhaps what it already has achieved. Okay, in public exhibitions also, we shall have reproductions of the sounds of nature and of noises familiar and unfamiliar. Nothing will be easier than to catch the sounds of the waves on the beach, the roar of Niagara, the discords of the streets, the noises of animals, the puffing and rush of the railroad train, the rolling of thunder, or even the tumult of a battle. So there's a tone here that's excited and curious about what this piece of technology, this new piece of technology, could do. So there's a lot of what's the word? I suppose, curiosity and intrigue about the possibilities for this piece of technology, and it lists some of the things it can do. So what it's currently doing is it's sitting in a shop, almost as a display item, it seems, for people to record themselves and listen to it back. And then we consider that it could be used for communication, it could be used for preserving voices for historical purposes, and then they consider, it could be used to record singers so that we can listen to them back. But it's all kind of hearsay at the moment. So, just from the things that I've said, and perhaps anything else you noticed, I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes now without me, just to jot down two things from that source that we learn about the music playing technology within the source, so about the phonograph. And then if you can, I'm going to leave most of the source on the screen, but for those of you on Patreon, you'll have access to this anyway. Find a quote to back that up, just as evidence of it. That's all you need. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we will have a look at source B. Okay, brilliant. Right, so let's go to source B then. We come back to evidence and points from source A when we start comparing, but it's just so that you've got notes going so that when we refer back to it in a minute, you haven't forgotten everything. Okay, it's good to kind of, in the exam itself, you might make notes around the text, so you'd be annotating as you go, highlighting quotes rather than writing them down. Obviously, if you've managed to print this before today's session, then you could have done that. So as you're reading even, you want to be highlighting, making notes, so that you don't have a thought and immediately forget it when you then go to write about it. So that's why annotation is really important. Okay. Right, so this one is a more modern text, so hopefully the language itself will be slightly easier to understand. It will be more familiar to us. And we're going to think about more than what we were before now. So we are going to consider how music technology is presented here, but then we've got that extra layer of thinking, which is how is that then different to the first source? Okay, so in this 2024 article, Margaret Sullivan discusses rediscovering a love of vinyl. So this is more like a retrospective. So this is someone who has returned to older technology for the love of it, whereas the first one is about the excitement of the new technology, which ironically is a very similar technology, but we're looking at it from 2 points in time. So one of them is looking forward to it and the other one is looking back at it. So that might be something you bring up in your comparison of viewpoints if we considered the other comparison question that you look at, but that's just to kind of give you a context of the perspective. Okay. Living in a Manhattan apartment, I've learned to streamline. I have what I need and not too much more. So when a large box arrived at holiday time last year, I cringed. Yes, I was delighted that my 2 young adult children had cooked up a thoughtful gift for me, but I was dubious about dealing with what was inside the cardboard. A stereo turntable and speakers, along with a single vinyl album, a Bob Dylan compilation. Okay, so far, nothing about the technology itself. So don't get kind of distracted when the writer is talking about something else and just start chatting about her viewpoint on trying to streamline her clutter, because it's got nothing to do with the subject of the question. So wait for the subject to crop up before you start highlighting things and making notes. After all, I had winnowed my music listening to what I could stream directly from my iPhone. Okay, so there is mention of other technology here then. So she's talking about her phone and how she streams music from there. And she's saying that that's all she does now at this point within the text. Along with a single, I never know how to pronounce this brand, Boss speaker capable of filling any room with gorgeous sound. Anything I wanted at any time, all within 2 smallish rectangular prisms. A moment's notice, I could pack the whole thing up in a shoebox. So she's saying that she likes the fact that some technology is compact but effective, and that it's on tap, so she can use it whenever she wants, and it's in her home. So there's a difference there between the technology in the first one, where most people have to go into a shop. It's not yet technology that's in their home. If we look back to it, on the stereoscopic company's premises, only to step from the pavement. There, this recent invention, the phonograph, which first imprints a message, can be seen and heard. So there isn't a suggestion you can actually buy it yet. Perhaps very rich people can, but it's not accessible to the writer, certainly. So here the music is much more accessible. It's on tap whenever you want it. The technology is there that can allow that. However, I was touched and could think of no viable alternative, and so, with the help of a friend, I set up the primitive machinery, cables and speakers, speaker wire and all, in an available corner. As it turned out, I had just the right spot for it. We put on the Dylan album, and from the start I was charmed. I enjoyed the sensory experiences of handling the double album cover, placing the disc on the spindle, watching it revolve and listening as the familiar sound of blowing in the wind flowed from the speakers speakers set on the floor. The music sank into my bones in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. Normally so inseparable from my devices, I began to find it a relief to be non-digital for a while. So there's a sense that musical technology can be quite removed from the physical, and that actually when it is physical, it's more enjoyable. And there's definitely a physicality in that first source. So we can talk about the physicality of the technology and the sensory experience. And I listened differently, with more depth and contemplation, somehow. The music sank into my bones in a way that I hadn't experienced in years. Part of that, perhaps, was the repetition. Without a collection, I had to go deep inside of Wide, Dylan's query, how many times? Turned out to be an apt question. Soon I felt the need to branch out. The first stop involved time travel of a sort. My friend and I sought out a record store in Greenwich Village, where hand-lettered signs guided searchers through the rows of bins. So, actually, if we were thinking about similarities, which we're not going to be, but if we were thinking about similarities, both texts discuss how the music technology allows for a form of time travel. So in the first source, they talk about how it could be used in museums, and so it's this idea of, well, in the future, people are going to be able to look back. And here, this is the future, I suppose, looking back. So showing that it allows for a form of time travel. But again, we're not looking at similarities, we're going to be looking at differences. Flipping through, I found Frank Sinatra's A Swingin' Affair. I overpaid, but it was worth it to hear the master crooner kick off with Night and Day and make his way to nice work if you can get it. Who cared about the skips and pops? Then my brother sent me a remastered version of the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour, unopened, wrapped in plastic, and delivered by Amazon. Old meets new. Soon I discovered an outdoor market where I picked up the Allman Brothers' Eat a Peach and Jackson Browne's Late for the Sky. A friend teased that I had become a hobbyist. Albums were treasure, and I was on the hunt. I hit pay dirt after chatting with a neighbour who had a collection of albums that she hadn't listened to in years. She invited me to come and have a look. Her cache of classics included Carole King's Tapestry, Janis Joplin's Pearl, and the first Aretha Franklin album, with the Queen of Soul looking like a fresh-faced teen on the cover. My neighbour only held back her Laura Nyro albums, a sentimental favourite she made up for it by looking the other way as I picked up the original Broadway cast recording of Hair. So, okay, in both we can see that musical technology can allow for sentimental feeling. So in this one it's talking about an album that means something particular to a person. In the first one it's talking about personal communication and relationships, and that presumably would be very sentimental. That's something we could perhaps talk about. Not a cent changed hands, take them, she said, and enjoy. So there we can see that the music technology is actually building relationships, bringing people together. It's a source of connection, which we can definitely see in the first one as well. My own original collection had disappeared over the years, along with dozens of precious mixtapes handmade by friends. What was I thinking to let them all go? Back then I took it all for granted. There we go, so the mixtapes. So she's saying that the music technology allows for people to make their own audible sounds and to share that with friends and for that to have meaning for people. Again, that's a similarity. We're not looking at similarities, we're looking at differences. So this is quite a hard question. You bought albums for a few bucks, swapped them with friends, used the V shape of the double white album to weed out stalks and seeds. Later, when my son was a baby, we'd put on Tracy Chapman's Fast Car and dance around the living room, putting him to sleep. Albums were simply there. The sound quality wasn't perfect, but the vibe couldn't be beat. Now I find, after all this time, something of that analogue magic remains. As much as I appreciate the immediacy, the precision and the endless array of digital music, vinyl has its own peculiar beauty. And I'm so glad now that bulky box came to my door. Okay, lovely. Right, so considering some of the things that I talked about there, then I'm going to do a similar thing, but I'm only going to give you a minute this time. I just want you to write as many things as you can think of that about music technology from this text, along with quotes. So I'm actually just going to scroll up to the first half, because there's probably more there. Again, if you're on Patreon, you can download the full text and look at that all the way through, and find some evidence for the point you're making. Don't worry at this point about them having to be different to the first source. We'll look at that in a moment, which is why I'm only giving you a minute, because then I'm going to give you a moment to consider the differences between them before I fill out that planning table as a final exercise. So, task now, just for a minute. I'm going to leave you to it. I want you to just write down as many things as you can think of. It might just be one or two about the music technology in this text, and then try and find evidence to back that up. Okay, that's quite quick. So I'm now just going to scroll slightly to our difference box. Now notice I've only got 2 rows here, and that's because the question is not a long question. You only want to be writing about 2 different comparisons, and then you're going to move on to your next question. So in the exam board that I'm specifically thinking about, it's only worth 8 marks. So for each paragraph, it's just worth 4 marks. So if you've got the sheet, then use that. If you'd rather copy it into your book, or if you don't have the sheet, then do that. But here we're just going to write what the difference is for each one, and then evidence from either, and we can explain that further when we actually write it up. So this will be the last thing we do for the YouTube. This is kind of planning the response, and then when we close off the YouTube video for everyone on Patreon, we will then write the full response using quite specific paragraph structures for that. So I'm just going to give you a couple of moments now to consider what 2 differences specifically about the music technology, not about the writers, not about the world, not about the time period, specifically about the music technology. Obviously the time period might impact that. 2 differences, and then evidence if you can, but if not, we will scroll back and have a look together. So just a couple of minutes on that on your own, and then we will fill it out together as the final thing. Okay, right, so let's consider this then. So, one difference that I would say is between the music technology in the first source and the music technology in the second source is that music technology in the first source feels quite out of reach, so it's not accessible to most people. Whereas in the second source, it is accessible to most people to the point where it's almost being taken for granted. Okay, so I'm going to pop that little explanation there in my difference box with my terrible handwriting with this pen. So I'm not going to write it in full sentences here just because it'd be quite difficult to do with this pen. So source A, technology not readily available, out of reach. And then in source B, it's immediately accessible to most. Okay, and then I need evidence from both, so I need to look at source A as an example of why, not why, but where we see that it's not accessible to most people. The speed is of any number of times the offers will be. One has only to step from the pavement of Regent Street into the London Stereoscopic Company's premises. That there is kind of what feels like that it's not in people's homes, right? Let's see if we can find anything else that's similar. Also, yeah, so it's something you can access in public but not in private. Maybe that's the specific point, really. So let's just have that. One has only to step from the pavement of Regent Street. So one only has to step foot. So bear with me while I write it down. One only has to step from the pavement of Regent Street, London. Into the London Stereoscopic Company's premises. Okay, great. Source B showing that it's accessible for everybody was up here somewhere. Anything I wanted at any time, all within two smallish rectangular prisms. There we go. Anything I wanted at any time, or within two. I'll write the proper two actually when I write it down. Smallish rectangular prisms. Great. Okay. I would say another difference then between source A and source B is that source A considers how the technology isn't only for music and how it can be used for recording really important speech and how that's just as important, whereas in source B it focuses only on the music. So source A uses considered for speech is just as important Whereas source B, the primary use is music, is playing music. Okay, so a quote for that first one is I'm going to put down here: the waves on the beach, the roar of Niagara, the discords of the streets, the noises of animals. So yeah, let's put a few of those down. I'm just going to put a couple and put ... So the waves on the beach. So I'm not actually talking about speech here, but just other sounds. So sounds as a whole are important to hear, not just music. So the waves on the beach, the roar of Niagara, and I'm going to put ... Okay. And then source B is just about music. I mean, all they talk about is music. Soon I felt the need to branch out. That's interesting because all that involves is music. Because she then just names a load of music albums. So she's only branching out as far as different artists are concerned, not in terms of different sounds. Soon I felt the need to branch out. Only then mentions different... This handwriting is so bad now. Music albums. Okay. So there you have it. So that's the plan. So in terms of actually writing it, which we will do in a minute for the Patreon crowd, you would put that into sentences whereby you're going to be introducing something about source A and quoting it and perhaps explaining it a little bit further, and then making a comparative sentence in terms of how that's different to how the music technology is presented in source B. You quote it, you might explain it a bit further. The explanation is kind of like an inference, which means that you're taking information from the text, you're inferring something from it. So an inference here might be that my inference about the fact that you'd have to go into the stereoscopic company's premises in order to listen to a phonograph shows that it is not immediately accessible in people's homes as music is in source B. So you go point, quote, inference, comparative sentence, quote, inference. Because within the comparative sentence, you are making a point about the second source. And then you do that twice, and that would be enough for a summary comparison. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye to the YouTube crowd now. Thank you very much for sticking with me there. I hope you made some good notes and have a good idea of how you might structure a response for this kind of question. If you want to see the full worked model answer, please go to my Patreon, as this video is being recorded, so it will be up there for you to look at as well. And thank you very much for joining me. So please like, comment and subscribe. Join the Patreon if you can. And I look forward to seeing you next time when we return to a maths lesson.